cold intro in. But always great to have you. I think this is the second time I've had you on the podcast. Caolan Robertson, Byline Television. One of my favorite follows on Twitter, have been for a very, very long time. You came to my attention because you outed your former employer as a massive piece of shit, Ezra Levant at Rebel News. We're going to get to that in just a couple minutes, and lots to get to because everything's happening and you're like in the heart of it. So when you reached out to me, I'm like, oh my God, I got to get this guy on and do an impromptu podcast. So thank you very much for joining us. You're in Odessa. Is that correct? Is that correct right now? Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm in Odessa. I'm in a high rise right now, so I can see everything that happens in the city. But I'm about 5 minutes walk from the Black Sea, so it's pretty wild.
Well, okay, why? Like, that's the area of the world that they're telling everybody to stay away from, right? I know you're a videographer and a journalist. I know you're there doing a movie, and I want to get to that, or a film documentary. But what prompted you to go from the safety of your house in the UK to like literally the heart of the biggest war we've seen in decades? Why?
Well, I remember when the war first broke out, and I really wanted to document what was going on. When I used to work with right-wingers, and I used to make, I guess, a lot of disinformation when I was much younger, I felt terrible about a lot of it. I felt like I had spent the years afterwards trying to do the opposite of what I used to do, which was focus on countering disinformation and actually getting to the heart of issues and actually telling the truth about them. Mm-hmm. And when this war broke out, I saw the shit that the Kremlin were putting out, saying that it wasn't a war, it was a special military operation. People in Britain and people in America were putting out loads of stuff, downplaying all of this, putting out Russian talking points. And I was like, this is the biggest, not just war in Europe we've had since World War II, but propaganda effort and disinformation scheme we've seen since those days as well. And I know how that stuff works. And I felt like I needed to be there. So John Sweeney, veteran war correspondent, went inside North Korea, confronted the Church of Scientology, confronted Putin about the shooting down of MH17, reached out, and he was like, hey, why don't you come to Kyiv and we can make a film about the casualties so far and the number of people that have been killed. And I was like, okay, Kyiv seems pretty safe, but I'd never been to a war zone in my life. So got on a train, went to see him, spent a few days there, heard stories from people coming back from the front line that were out of control, things I'd never imagined were possible still in Europe. If you see cats and dogs on the side of the road who are wailing near the front lines, don't pick them up because the Russians have booby-trapped them and turned them into mines specifically to target children. There are hotels filled with journalists being eradicated nonstop. Things that seem to target like literally children, aid workers. Like I remember aid workers telling me that they started even taking the cross off the top of their cars when they go into frontline villages because they would get targeted even more because the Russians like doing that because they're brutal. They also do double taps. They'll hit an area, they'll hit a warehouse, and then they'll do a tap again and hit it 20 minutes later to hit the rescue workers. And I was like, my mind was blown. I didn't actually know the war was as bad as it was until I physically got to Kyiv, which was a failure, I guess, for myself in a lot of ways, but a failure for the media because I guess it hadn't reported the extent of it in the way that it needed to at that time. So I was like, I don't want to leave this country until I've at least seen some of this or documented some of it or put some of it together and put it out. Because when you hear information like that, it drives me mental. And the only way I can kind of cope with it sometimes is to be able to tell the rest of the world about it. And if you hear something crazy, you want to then tell other people so that at least you don't feel like the only one that knows this. And it kind of felt like that. And the only thing that I have is, I don't have political power, I don't have money, but I have a camera and the ability to tell stories quite well. So I was like, I want to go to the front line. And John was like, no, you don't have any military training. And, you don't have insurance to go to the front line. This is like out of control. And I was like, well,
let's get it there. He tried to clue you in. He's like, hey, dude, do you know what it's like here? Do you know what it takes? And you're like, that's the benefit of being under 30, Caolan. It really is. You're like, fuck it. Let's go.
Yeah, I was like, is there a physical road to go there? He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, do we have a car to go on that road? Yeah, okay. Well, then let's get in the car and go on that road and go east. And so he was like, okay, well, he put me on a 3-day training course with the Ukrainian military. This was like, it was for like high octane situations. It was actually so dramatic, twice as difficult because a lot of it was in not English. So it's not normal for a reporter to do the training once they get to the war zone. Usually they do it before and then they go, but it was kind of back, it was the other way around. That's fine. It was all running around, simulating the aftermath of bomb sites. And then so picked up Paul Conroy, world's most, amazing war correspondent, been to 19 wars. And we just went east, and it was the first time I'd heard artillery shells going off. It's the first time I'd heard explosions. And every time the pressure wave hit, I was like completely shook off my feet. And John used to have to describe to me the difference between incoming and outgoing, right? So a lot of the time you hear a massive bang and you think something's about to hit you. And he says, no, that's coming from our side, because the same noise comes from artillery on your side of the front line that sounds as bad as the artillery coming in. Mm-hmm. And he said, the way you know is when it comes in, you feel it through your boots, because it hits the ground and it comes up through your boots. And that's when you know when to run. And it was like learning all of this stuff on the spot was out of control. But I guess I was filming all of this through a viewfinder and a camera. And it kind of separated me from reality in a lot of ways. I felt like I was watching a film rather than being in it. But anyway, it was out of control. But that film, we'd ended up documenting use of chemical weapons on civilians, war crimes that Russians were carrying out against civilian populations, white phosphorus, torture. And now it was the first film about the Ukraine war now to be put on Apple TV. So I was super proud of that, because it was done early, it was done timely, it was done at a time it needed to be done, and all the findings were submitted to the International Criminal Court. So it felt like meaningful. And then I left Ukraine and I couldn't get back to normal life. I was like, I don't know how I can go to, and that film won 19 awards. I was flown to Paris, I was flown to Dublin, all these different places to accept this stuff. And it didn't feel right to be at places with cocktail parties and canapes being carried.
When the shit's going on. Yeah.
To celebrate the film that you made. It was like, this money should go to this place. So I could never really just go back to that, knowing what's still happening. So my mind was always here. And that's when I moved. That's why I moved here a month ago, because I was like, I felt like the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life was make films about what's happening here to the people in this country. And I also just love Ukraine. Like, I'm dating someone here now who's Ukrainian, who's beautiful. And I just love like the people, the culture, everything about this country it's magnetic,
Dude, you fell in love with Ukraine. You went there to do something, stepped outside of your comfort zone in a big bad way, like when they put you into military training to go and film a documentary. That's pretty serious shit. But you made mention of a couple things. I just want to double back before we move on. One of them was it was so much worse than you thought it was. And we only hear what we hear, right? We get a funneled group of information about things that are going on. I'm a Kyiv Independent guy. I'm always on the Kyiv Independent site. Ilya Pomerenko is a great follow as well. Igor Shusko, who's awesome. I've talked to him a couple of times. Fantastic. There are very few people that are telling the actual story. And there's a story that came out of there today of a Russian ammo depot that went up in flames in Tver, I think 2 hours north. And if you follow a couple of these guys, follow a couple of these guys, you get the real story. You get the real outlet of what's going on. When you say it was worse than you thought, quantify that for me. I know you've given me examples, but worse than you thought in terms of what's happening or the information that we're not getting about what's happening to the Ukrainian people?
Worse than I thought in terms of how personal it felt. I mean, I remember getting a flight out of the UK and, seeing the edge of Dover, seeing the start of Europe, and then landing in Poland. And then, you can't fly into this country. So you got to get into old, Soviet era, World War II era, almost kind of looking trains that rattle all the way to get to Ukraine. So you're thrown back into like what feels like literally a movie about old Europe. And then there's a war. And I think I could watch all the drive, all the way, the landscape that looked exactly the same as Poland and almost looked the same as the English countryside, until we got to the final stop, which was Kramatorsk, which is the final train stop as well. And the town of Bakhmut, which was like a 5-kilometer drive further than that, was actively falling when I was there. And we took the road to Bakhmut from Konstantinivka, which is a city just south of Kramatorsk. And I could feel and see basically every day we were checking it, the front line coming towards us, almost towards where I live, almost towards Britain, it was going west. And I saw villagers who were, and when I first arrived there, I was told, and I read a lot of articles saying that, in Donetsk and in these regions, the people are kind of half Russian and they don't really mind, who's going to, they're sympathetic to Russians. I spoke to villagers who were terrified of the Russians arriving at any moment between Konstantinivka and Bakhmut. This is around the Chasiv Yar area. Who were like, the only reason I haven't left is because all the other villagers have left and they've left all of their pets, and the pets are without anyone to look after them, and the rescue workers can't support the pets. So we're trying to host everything. We're trying to look after all these pets and these pigs, and we don't have any other option to leave. And it was like maths teachers and civilians being pulled out of their houses because they were literally on fire. We filmed rescue workers going in and out of Bakhmut, and it was the civilian impact that I didn't expect. I thought it was a war between two sides of military. I thought it was the Ukrainian army versus the Russian army. It's the Russian army versus everyone alive. That's what I didn't realize. That's what I didn't expect. And it was every day civilians being pulled out of rubble. And it was specifically seeing rescue workers being targeted. It was told that I should take the press sticker off my armor because that makes you more of a target. This is the stuff I only thought you would see in combat with ISIS, because ISIS are one of the first groups to, blowing the word away to start targeting journalists specifically, or groups like that in the Middle East. Didn't think the Russian army would be doing it. It was seeing that at night we would look out through the skyline and we would see this glowing, it was almost beautiful, sort of bright chandelier melting image falling down. And we were Googling it and realized it was chemical weapons. It was white phosphorus, and the locals called it lustra, which is Ukrainian for chandelier. And that was, we would go to the area it landed on the next day after curfew, and it had melted and landed on specifically civilian areas, and people were devastated, crying, saying, we never thought our Russian brothers and sisters would turn on us like this, and their entire lives are being destroyed. There was countless things like this, and it was all civilians that had been destroyed. We went to Kherson and the areas that were occupied by the Russians, and I spoke to young people that had been pulled into torture chambers under the police station, which I went to in Kherson, that had just been opened up after the city was deoccupied. And they said, I was arrested because I looked at a soldier in the wrong way. These are like shop workers, these are car salesmen, and they were tortured for months. And they talked to me about the exact type of torture they experienced. And these were the sweetest people ever. And that is what I didn't realize, what life would actually be like under Russian occupation and what the Russians actually think of the Ukrainians. The whole narrative of how it was about denazifying the country and liberating the country. The only thing they were trying to liberate the country from was fucking humanity. And it was just like, it was absolutely shocking. Like, I didn't expect it to be a war on the essence of Ukrainians. I thought it was a war between the Donetsk People of Republic and Zelensky's army, this and this and this. And I didn't realize it involved everyone at that level. And there's countless stories like this. Countless. I mean, I'm going to go to Kherson on Monday because my friend is there, and she said, Caolan, I don't leave the house until the wind starts. In Britain, we leave the house when the wind stops and the rain stops. Here, I don't leave until the wind starts because there's fucking drones that the Russians are flying, crashing into everyone. A public bus last Monday, civilians everywhere, police officers, they're crashing it into everyone in the city at random. And so people don't leave the house until it's windy and the drones can't fly. It was things like that that I saw when I came here that blew my mind.
I got chills listening to you, obviously, because it's a different perspective, one that we don't get, right? And you combine that with disinformation, the Russian psyops that have gone into presenting arguments or narratives around people in certain regions of that beautiful country that are somehow fiercely loyal to Russia, that don't want anything to do with Ukraine and Zelensky. That is one of the number one talking points in the Russian disinformation DOJ papers. It's like, no, these are the people of Ukraine, but they're Russian nationals, and we're liberating from them. But it's been so effective. People like me sit back here and go, "Oh, that must be part of the case, right? It must be sure. Maybe that is it. Maybe the rich history in that country, they've got pro-Russians." But what you're saying is that's not necessarily the case, and Russians are out to kill those people too.
Yeah, which is what I didn't realize. I mean, genuinely, there was probably hundreds of people that we spoke to from the south to the east, and I asked all of them that question: what do you want to do, and what do you think will happen when the Russians arrive? And every single one of them looked terrified, because if they had any Russian sympathy before this full-scale invasion, it went when they saw what happened in Bucha, in Irpin, in Izium, in any of the places between Mykolaiv and Kherson that were occupied briefly by the Russians. And that spreads on Telegram here. That spreads around everywhere, saying when they took over our town, they tied their hands behind everybody's back and shot them in the back of the head and threw them in mass graves. I went to the mass graves in Izium forest, which was still heavily mined. So, I had to, couldn't walk in certain areas. You always had to stay on the path. But it was the most eerie, disturbing thing I have ever seen. And Ukrainians saw that. And that's when the last sympathy went for Russians, because they know that that's the life that they would be exiled to if they were occupied by. And that's why the Zelensky stuff about not giving up an inch of this land, because this isn't about land and wheat fields and territories. This is about millions of Ukrainians being destined to that torture, murder, genocide, mass graves. And that's what he doesn't want to happen. I think that's what the right wingers and the Tenet people and all these cunts are putting out, because it's just like that's what it is. It's not,
dude, you're British. That word is allowed. You're British. That word is allowed. They are
yeah. And they know what this is. They know what this war is.
That's what I want to ask you. That's what I want to ask you. I mean, you've been on the disinformation side with Rebel News. And we'll get to that in just a second. You've been a highly paid videographer, highly paid podcaster for that side of the equation. You understand what goes into this. And when Tim Pool came out and he's like, listen, I have nothing to do with that Russian disinformation network that was paying me $100,000 an episode. There's an assertion by all those guys that are associated with Tenet Media. And this is kind of a lead into, the disinformation that we've seen roll around the atmosphere that has taken over so many minds and hearts, that has changed people's opinions on Russia, that have no business supporting that government, no business supporting this war. It's not a special operation. And empathy for people and the hatred of the Ukrainian people, which is something Tim Pool went off on several podcasts. And when he found out he was being paid $100,000 an episode from Russia, he maintained he had no idea. Now, as someone in this business who understands the economics of this business, and I understand it a little bit too, how is that fucking humanly possible?
Well, it's not possible. I mean, if someone like Tim Pool, with his plastic headphones and his cheap microphone, thinks that $100,000 an episode was worth anything close to that, what the Russians were paying him, when all he does is sit and talk shit about things like Ukraine, this is a person who has never left the basement of the studio that they pontificate from, never mind have been to a war zone. And if they think that what they had to say was worth anything like the Russians were paying him, then they are either completely stupid or they knew where it was coming from. And to not even ask, it makes no sense. I know people that know Tim. I know producers that know some of those people. And I know for a fact that they know, because they have expressed concerns to those producers that I've heard. Both him, Lauren Southern, and one other person have absolutely had 100% confirmation that they knew where this money was coming from. One of the people at Tenet, one of the presenters, was paid in rubles accidentally once, apparently, one of the payments. This is what I've been told by one of the producers that works with them. So these people knew where the money was coming from. They knew this. And if they didn't, either they're completely stupid to the point where then you shouldn't be listening to them, or they knew where it was coming from. I mean, of course they did. I mean, there are a very small number of people that actually fund and invest in hard right content, like the Tim Pool show, like Lauren Southern show, and they're finite. These are the angel investors of Rebel. Some of them that I met, it's the Pamela Geller types. It's in the UK, you've got the Paul Marshall types, but it's a very small number of people. They could easily have figured out that it wasn't those guys, and pretty quickly drawn conclusions, even if they hadn't been told. Of course, they'd been told. I mean, Tenet took over and became hands-on in June this year in terms of all of their contracts and all the social media stuff. All of the contracts of all of the presenters there had them renegotiate had their contract renegotiated in June this year, and then everything was taken over by the Russians, all the Discord, everything. And that's when they took over full control. It was all about building it up to the US election so that they could be more hands-on with it. And that's when Lauren Shen took a step back. So they would have had communications with people outside of Lauren Shen at that point. But of course they would have known. This is fact. Absolutely. I mean, I've been told this by producers as well that work with them.
So the DOJ puts out a big Blinken, Merrick Garland. They come out last week and they basically say, hey, listen, we're going to lay this out for everybody over the next week or so. We're going to lay out the Russian disinformation network. We're going to tell you RT's role in this. We're also going to tell you here today that there are over 2,500 different media outlets, influencers, media type that support this messaging that are either being paid for or have been co-opted to deliver Russian-friendly narratives. Those narratives are the ones that we all are aware of that sit in the wake of every single J6 convoy, Tommy Robinson-led bullshit. It's all about anti-immigration, anti-Ukraine, pro-religion, anti-LGBTQ, your country is broken, civil war. These talking points were all the same, right? They're all the same. And we see them from several different outlets here. You and I probably know the same people. You and I actually have been beating the shit out of the same people for quite some time. You're just way nicer about it than I am. But with the history that you have at Rebel, and then you saw the DOJ lay that out, you were real excited. Like you were real excited to go, okay, I want to see this. I want the receipts. But you seem to have a pretty good handle on how that flow of information, money worked, who the principals are. So in your mind, and I'm curious, and I want to know how you think when you see something like that announcement, where you're like, okay, if I'm right, this is how it works. This is how Russia funnels money. These are the people that they work with. How do you look at that if it's a Venn diagram? And how would you explain it to somebody who's like, okay, Caolan, sorry, you were involved in this industry. You've dedicated your life to doing the absolute opposite of what that industry is, to the point where you're living in an active war zone to make amends, which is fucking incredible to me. But what is it that you see where you're like, okay, I think I can probably piece this together now in terms of where the money comes from, who it goes to, and who might be involved and how it works, because you've got every single outlet that everybody would point the finger at as an accusatory finger of parlaying that message or agreeing or aligning with Russian disinformation and some of the tenets of those messages. I mean, they're incredibly quiet now. They're denying that they have anything to do with it, or they're just saying, "Hey, listen, we're not involved." But clearly, they are, because the work and the words all match up. I mean, from every single talking point. So, how do you think that works in your mind?
Well, I wasn't surprised when the indictment came out. I was pretty excited because it didn't just confirm my suspicions. My suspicions were actually not suspicious enough. It was, oh my gosh, it was very cathartic. When I worked with Rebel, there were very suspicious funding networks from different parts of the world. Actually, one of the main reasons that Lauren Southern said that she quit was because she had been told to go on a foreign trip, I think it was to Israel, that had already been paid for by the government of Israel, and they still wanted to crowdfund on top of it. But that was just the beginning of a lot of this stuff. When Putin was gearing up for his full-scale invasion, I noticed a lot of the people that I worked with started hanging around Moscow a lot more. So Tommy Robinson was flown there just before the full-scale invasion to premiere his documentary. I think it was called The Rape of Britain. And when I ran his crowdfunding website, so when he got out of prison and when he started out, and I worked with him for the first year, I ran the back end of the website, right? So I could see all the donations that would come in and out, and there was a lot of money in there. It was about £400,000, which would be about $650,000 in the space of a few months. This was all raised on the back of him being banned from Twitter, and a huge amount of that money were large donations from Russia. There were email correspondences sent to his email and the contact forms from the Russian embassy, inviting him out there all the time. And I know that when I stopped working with him, that he replied to those emails and he went to Russia. And Lauren Southern went to Russia in 2018, and I was invited to go to that trip with her. In fact, my old passport is still in the Russian embassy in London, because I went to the Russian embassy to apply for a visa to go there, because I was thinking about doing it back then, and left my passport there, and I couldn't go because I left my passport there. But I'm glad that I didn't go, because looking back, It was part of what we're seeing now. And I'm so glad I didn't get on that plane. And Lauren told me, Caolan, they're actually going to take us to the Donbass, and they're going to take us to all these areas and give us this tour. And it's really interesting, and it's a war zone. And what they were trying to do with Lauren, and that's why I'm glad I didn't go on this trip, and what they were trying to do with Tommy and everybody back then was a precursor to this war, was to do propaganda and influence for influencers like that, to basically start putting out information that the Donbass is Russia, and to justify the full-scale invasion. So this had all started ages ago. Rebel Media in 2018, at exactly the same time, put Katie Hopkins and did a crowdfunder to send multiple journalists to Russia and do exactly the same thing. In 2022, I watched from a distance when they did another crowdfunder. They sent a journalist to Moscow after Putin invaded this country in Ukraine to do sympathetic interviews with people on the ground in Moscow. Rebel didn't do a crowdfunder to send anybody to Ukraine to do anything, reports here, because they are funded by the Kremlin, indirectly or directly, and that's why they have sent reporters to the Kremlin post Putin's invasion and not to this country. And it is the same with all of these people. This is why when I watched Tim Pool say that Ukraine is the enemy of the United States, I knew exactly why he was saying that. And it's the same reason why Lauren went to see Dugan in 2018. And it's the same reason why Ezra crowdfunded money to send his reporters to Moscow. And I could see all this stuff from a distance. And when that indictment dropped, it was crystal clear. It was the first example of actual evidence of everything that I had suspected. And in fact, it was worse. And whatever's going to come out this week is going to be even more damning. I think it's going to implicate and indict even more of these grifters. I hope that Hinkle account is gone as well. I hope all of these accounts are gone, because this is a national security threat at this point, and I can see it. I organized one of these rallies in London in 2017. It was called the Day for Freedom rally with Tommy. 18,000 people was there, and the Russia Today invited me to their offices in London about 3 days before that. So I went with Milo Yiannopoulos and I went with Tommy, and they all sat down with us and they said, hey, we know that you're doing this rally. We really want to cover it for you guys. We think we could do some fantastic coverage. We can do some great tweets around it. We can do some pre-interviews with you. And they did. And on the day, they live tweeted the entire event, and they finished it with the fireworks at the end saying, what a great success. Great, great, great. Even though there was police attacked and there was disruption and chaos in the streets of London. So and I always wondered for years after why Russia Today would have invited us to their offices at Millbank Tower in London, all of us, and it promoted us so much and gave us, unlimited budget for cabs from wherever we wanted to their offices. And it was a precursor to this, and it was all about this. So I could see that from the inside.
Can I just say holy shit for a second? Can I just say holy shit?
I hadn't spoken about this before, actually, about the Russia Today. I have photos of all of this, by the way. I have photos in the office with Milo. Like, I will send you this.
At Russia Today? Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They were like treating us like we were the second coming of Christ in there. Like we were walking in and they were like, oh my God, and I thought, every time we go into a newsroom, normally we go to BBC, we go to Channel 4, it's pretty hostile, right? When you walk in, everyone's turning around going, oh God. You walk into Russia Today and it's like the boss has arrived. Oh,
thank you for coming. Well, it speaks to that little memorandum that was in the DOJ filing where they were saying, hey, we were ready to wine and dine the right-wing media ecosystem in the Western world. So let's go. Like that was in 2016, 2017. So it makes sense. Diving into that again, you mentioned something because Rebel News is a Canadian outlet, Ezra Levant, who I have no love for. And you just said basically, hey, indirectly or directly, they absolutely take Kremlin money.
Of course. Well, there were large donations sent through Tommy's website from Kremlin-linked accounts, from Russian accounts. You can donate through Rebel Media in any way you can. They've made it so easy to send them money. You could put it in an envelope and post it to their office from anywhere in the world. They're pretty excited about getting cash from people. So I imagine there's loads of influence there. But again, it's not a coincidence that they crowdfunded and they sent reporters to Moscow post the full-scale invasion and not to Kyiv. That is extremely telling. And this, I don't think it was crowdfunding to make it. I think there is something behind that. There's something extremely dodgy about that.
What do you think it is? When you say because listen, dude, you've been on the inside, you've been in these offices, these people, you used to crowdfund and help. There's a Rebel News article there. There's a bunch of them, Rebel News in Moscow. What ordinary Russians think of Putin's war? I mean, this is what, 2022? You're not supposed to be there. I don't even know how someone from the Western world goes there and survives. If you're from Canada, the United States, and you're a media person, you're getting picked up and thrown in jail with Evan Gorsevich. I mean,
Yeah, so why haven't they been arrested? If I go to Moscow tomorrow, I'm getting arrested or killed 100%. If any of my colleagues do, they're getting killed. How has Rebel got people in Moscow literally within the first year of the invasion, when things are as nuclear and hot as anything? Because this was probably funded by something to do with the Russian government. When my friend, when Lauren went to Moscow in 2018. And when I was invited on that trip, I asked who paid for it, and she said it had been paid for already. And that was paid for probably by Gazprom or someone within the Russian government, of course. So they pay for this sort of stuff, whether it's large donations or dinners. There's an incredible budget for it. The US and Canadian media is very, very easily influenced. What is $1 billion to Russia? The weapons depot that's just been wiped off the face of the earth was like $4 billion of S-300 missiles and Icelandic missiles. So that's nothing to Russia. So it makes sense to me. I mean, again, Lauren's trip, it was like $10,000 that had been given to her for that. So be the same thing with Rebel. And then obviously, because they're grifters with no shame, they will have crowdfunded on top of the free.
It's the Rebel way, dude. It's the Rebel way. It's like you pointed out last time we had you on the show, because I wanted to know how it works. I mean, we're getting an inside look at how it works thanks to the Department of Justice. People like you that have decided to say, hey, listen, I can't do that. I need to inform people what's going on, and just what you see. I mean, it's really simple when you see a Western media outlet that is trumpeting Russia as the victim in a war where they're literally committing genocide against women, children, dogs, cats, farms, churches, human beings. It's super, super simple for people like me to go, oh, okay, well, I get it. But the effectiveness when you've got influencers and media outlets that are putting out, and this is the one that really shocked me. And I mean, this is a Rebel News article, and it's just a headline: U.S. sanction against Russia will come at a cost to American public without price increase in full to gas and food prices. If fear porn back to people, and that is all these people do, and it is exactly the Russian talking point and the MO of Putin. And so when I think about Ezra Levant, and I think about Rebel News, and I think about not just the crowdfunding, but I call them, if you're not getting paid if you ain't getting punched. That's sort of Ezra's thing, right? And you've pointed that out on CNN in several interviews in the past. But did you ever ask him about it? Did you ever say, hey, dude, where is this money coming from? And what was it like to meet with him? What was it like to talk to him? Was he interested in the content, or was he only interested in driving revenue and getting users and ginning people up to give him money for shit that's not real?
When I was pretty right wing in those days, the first thing I would ask people in the movement would be, what are the solutions? What do we do? How do we get more effective? It was about strategy, and it was about the information war and what we were involved in. Ezra was the first person I met in that movement who literally cut me off within 2 seconds of talking, pulled out his laptop, and just started showing me the back end of Nation Builder, which is the site they use to gather donations. And he was like, anyway, Caolan, we can talk about this later. So I just wanted to show you. And he did the pitch. He did the same thing to Mike Cernovich. I've had loads of people that I talked to after this. I was like, did you have this bizarre experience with Ezra Levant where he just only pitched how much money and signups he gets to you, and is completely uninterested in anything to do with politics? And they were like, yes. And he just showed me all of it. And he basically sat and boasted for about an hour at this hotel lobby in London. He was like, well, what you can do is you can get all these different tribes, right? You can get tribes of people who are 65 plus, tribes of people that believe in military stuff, tribes of people that believe in free speech. And you can email all of them individually, different crowdfunders or different marketing strategies without the others knowing that you're even doing it. You can do this tribe and this tribe and this tribe. And it was like this entire hour-long thing boasting about how much money he can make. And I was like, okay, yeah, cool. So what about free speech or anything to do with the point of any of this? And he was like, oh, okay, looked at me as if I was crazy, right? So this is a money-making opportunity. The reason that tweet you just showed me is a Kremlin tweet is because the audience of Rebel and right-wing audiences are actually not that interested in hearing crap like that's pro Russia and anti-Ukraine. They'd rather hear more about, what Trudeau is doing or about how their arms are being taken away. That's actually not something that's that interesting. And Ezra only chases algorithms and money and talking points it does well. So if he puts out something like that, which the audience don't really care about reading. It's done because he's been paid to tweet that. If he was to put out a tweet that was, whipping people up because it's to do with, anti-BLM, or if it's to do with like too many Sikhs being in Canada, he will have done that because the algorithms like it. So that's like another part to it too. But it was all about chasing algorithms. But I remember Ezra was all about special interests. Like I remember when I made my 5th report for Rebel, it was exposing, I'd exposed some corruption within UKIP, UK Independence Party, a right-wing party that had tried to expel one of its candidates secretly through this like coup, and it was very dodgy. And I, as what was supposed to be a journalist, right, because actually, while everyone around me was LARPing as a journalist, I was actually trying to do the thing.
Yeah.
I submitted the story to Ezra, and he pulled it immediately. And he was like, "No, we can't have this. This is bullshit. This isn't what we want to cover. This isn't good for our audience." And I'd be like, "Why?" And it turned out later it was because he wanted to do some special deal with someone from UKIP to like, sign something or sign some presenter, and it had something to do with Nigel Farage. And it was all just dirty special interest. This is the whole thing. They had no interest in journalism. We crowdfunded $100,000 for a woman that said she'd been raped by a migrant rape gang in the north of England. And he got her a lawyer, bought a billboard, spent 10 grand on it, and then just disappeared. Like none of the money even got put to this person. All of it was just filthy, dirty money. And I think they're taking filthy, dirty money from the Kremlin as well, just like all of these people. I'd say indirectly or directly, but directly is very likely. Ezra can sue anyone. I don't know if you can sue anyone in Ukraine right now anyway, so he can do whatever the fuck he wants. But it's
yeah, he's fairly litigious. He's all over Twitter these days going, I know you should. He's all over Twitter these days going, you think we're lying? You think we take money? Go ahead, say it. We'll sue you. And I'm like, someone's going to say it because I'm.
Well, I'll be in her son next week, so he can hand me the papers in person. I'll be there. I'll send them.
Are you coming to Canada next week?
What?
Are you coming to Canada next week? Is that what you just said?
No, I said I'll be in her son next week, so Ezra can hand me the papers there.
You'd have to survive that military training first. I give him 5 minutes. I give that doughy fuck 5 minutes in military training. He fascinates me. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'll say I'll probably see him at the other side of the front line if he does come here anyway. So he can hand it to me like that. He can make it into a paper plane and throw it across.
So does he? When you look at your former employer, and this is, you got out shortly after that meeting. If I'm not totally way off here, you were like, something's wrong here. You decided that you couldn't do this anymore, and that's when you went public and you tried to make amends for a couple of years. Your story fascinates me. We covered it in the last podcast. So I get the resentment journalism here and you letting it fly, which is awesome. But if the government of Canada came to you and they said, okay, you've seen the back end of these websites, you've seen the back end of Rebel News's website, you've seen the spreadsheets, you've sat with this man, would you go and talk to them? Would you go and sit in front of the House and say, hey, listen, here's what I know, here's what that man has done? You would have no problem doing that?
Oh, of course. I mean, I would give them anything I have. I mean, I don't really have anything recent, but I would testify, say whatever. I mean, absolutely. I mean, these people are the scum of the earth. They're undermining literally the fabric of society in North America, and they're taking blood money from the people that are genociding millions of Ukrainians. I mean, yeah, of course, I would do whatever I could to take them down. These people are the pinnacle of demonic and evil, despite being, Christians and whatever they claim to be. So yeah, absolutely.
It's a great wrap too, eh? How they've been able to take religion and just wrap a genocide around it and say, "Hey, look, guys, we're just doing this. We're doing this for Jesus. We're doing this for the Lord. It's okay. We're gonna get rid of the Nazis. Everybody here is gonna love Jesus. Kumbaya. It's gonna be great." And that vehicle in that area of the world has been fascinating for me to watch. Fascinating.
It is fascinating. I want to know what they think as well. I mean, I did actually speak to Lauren a couple of years, like relatively recently, because there was a thing that happened and I wanted to reach out to her. And I called her when I was actually in Ukraine last year, briefly. And I was like, this is like a real war. This is horrendous. It was about a legal thing I have to give to her. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, this is a real thing that's actually happening. And it's completely fucked up. And she was like, yeah, but aren't they all like Nazis there? I was like, no, but if they were, then surely you would then support Ukraine. So what is this about? And if they aren't, then who are the Nazis? And I don't think they can be bothered to actually comprehend this situation.
Do you think
So
that's
it's pretty
cognitive
futile.
bias, though, or do you think they're paid to say those things to you, like in those conversations? Because, like, you have to, if you're getting paid to say that, Russia's doing a great job and they're denazifying that area of the world, and Ukraine's an enemy of Western civilization, biolabs, Nazis, all the bullshit that's all a lie. And then you put it to her like, no, I'm here. It's happening. It's way worse than I thought. And she's like, well, wait, what about all the Nazis? That's not journalism, is it? That's just someone who's cognitively not interested in what you have to say, because she's probably getting paid by somebody to not listen to what you have to say, or to repeat the opposite of what you just said. Or
I
do you
think
think
it's
she's
like
that fucking stupid?
I think it's just a lazy scraping of some talking points they've seen on their news feeds. I don't think they care what they are saying. I don't think they care about what's happening in the world. All they care about is where the money is coming from and what they have to say to the person that's giving them that money. And then they just go to bed and they wake up in the morning, they'll say the next talking point. They don't actually give a fuck about any of it. It's just, all right, wake up in the morning. What's the best thing to say that will either drive engagement on my insane site on X, or what do my employers want me to say? Because Tenet will have sent these people lists of talking points every week. In fact, they do. They don't tell them exactly what they say, but we've seen in the indictment they say, okay, we need to focus on what was it that happened? Something happened, like a terrorist attack happened in Russia about a few months ago, and Tenet emailed their employees and said, hey, can we please focus on the angle that it was Ukrainians that did this terror attack, or Ukrainians that backed people that did the terror attack? So
the DOJ papers.
So she and people like that, they just get those emails, they read that stuff, and they say, "Oh, okay, cool, right? Ukrainians did this," and then they move on with their lives and carry on being awful people. So I don't think they compute, and they don't care. I mean,
what do you
really,
make of what do you make of her tweet? Her tweet was like, "Hey, listen, guys, I'm not going to say anything. I had no idea." I mean, it's the same shit. But when you assert that she absolutely knew, you assert that Tim Pool totally knew.
Yeah, absolutely. This will come out. This will come out. This will come out. Like, you can bookmark this. This will come out that they knew.
Oh, I'm going to not just bookmark it. I'm going to turn this into a promo and put thousands of dollars behind it and make sure everybody sees what you just said. That's what I'm going to do.
It's true.
When you think about what you do now, and you cover a bunch of different stuff, I encourage everybody to go, and all your information is in the description of the podcast. At Cal, it's actually spelled Caolan, spelled Caolan, but pronounced Caolan. Robertson, Caolan, ROB. I would encourage everybody to go there. Byline Television is where you work. And you consider the fact that you've made this massive change in your life, and you've decided to go and give back. You've decided to go and, into the heart of, as you pointed out, the biggest war in Europe since World War II. How angry were you when you found out, which something that you already knew, when you found out that the people that you started out with, the Tommy Robinsons of the world, the Lauren Southerns of the world, the Tim Pools of the world, all those people, Ezra Levant, how angry were you when you first saw, as you're in Ukraine, trying to tell the story of the genocide of the Ukrainian people and the war that's going on? How angry were you when you saw that filing, and what did you feel when you first saw it?
I was pretty furious because I've lost friends in this country. I was in a restaurant called Ria last year, and it was full of beautiful people who were. This is the last restaurant on the front line in a city that is basically besieged, Kramatorsk, and our car broke down one day. Was doing everything they could to just like bring people food, and a moment it felt like a shelter in the storm. And before curfew, everyone be rushing around to quickly put everything away to get back. I'll just never, every day back from the front lines, I go to this restaurant, and it was amazing, and it was full of other journalists. And the Russians put a surface-to-air missile into that restaurant a few months after I left. They hacked it to be surface to surface, and it's just a crater now, and everybody is dead inside it, and people I know have died, and people in this war I know have died, and I felt it has changed my entire perspective on it. It's gone from the people I worked with having, taken a bit of Russian cash because it's Christian country kind of base, to you've taken blood money, you've taken dictator money, and you've taken money from people that have murdered my friends, and you know that this has happened, and you will continue to do it. And I have a fire inside me that is raging every day at all of these people. And that indictment, it confirmed my worst fears about them all. I suspected it for a long time, but the fact that they continue to take that money is disgusting. They should return all of it, not return it. They should donate that money to people in this country. What have they done with it? What lovely stuff have they spent it all on fucking Cybertrucks? If they haven't, then it should be given to Ukraine. I'm just like, I think it's just actually disgusting. I'm glad I never got on that plane to Moscow with Lauren. I'm glad I never actually took money from those places. I indirectly from the Kremlin, but my disdain cannot be contained for these people.
Yeah, the personal connection there that's why I wanted to know. I mean, your life has changed so much, your perspective has changed so much, and it's very personal for anybody who's lost anybody in that war, right? That you see especially if you're in this business, in this industry. So, I'm grateful that you shared that perspective with me, and I can see the frustration in your face, and I know it's late there. So, I want to thank you for spending some time with me. And before I let you go, I know you just finished doing a video which I retweeted today, which is one which covers another subject that is fairly heavy these days, which is Israel, Gaza, and the war in Israel, the war in Gaza. And about 3,000, 2 days ago, about 3,000 Hezbollah pagers blew up, and literally mass circumcision event in Lebanon. Israel has kind of claimed responsibility. It is, depending on what side of the equation you're on, being called a terrorist attack, but it is one of the most incredible spycraft stories I have ever heard in my 51 years. And yeah, I'm old. And it happened again today. Can you just quickly, before I let you go, because you did such an amazing job offering a little history, a little window into that kind of spycraft, but can you kind of explain the history and what happened and how Israel was able to pull this whole thing off, which is still going on, by the way. It's still going on. These comms things that Hezbollah fighters have, these little pagers, communications devices that they keep in their front pockets. The videos are absolutely insane, of people literally exploding with this really in the front of their pants, which doesn't look good. But can you explain the history of that and explain what went into that you allege by your research making that happen?
Yeah, no, it's always nice to finish a show with something like Israel, Middle Eastern politics. No, but it's great. This story is unbelievable.
It's insane.
The story of sabotage goes back to Troy, right? So this has been going on since humans have been fighting each other, but this is the most sophisticated and advanced version of it that has ever happened. So in February this year, one of the general secretaries of Hezbollah goes on television and says, supporters, if you have any smartphones, any modern phones, put them in an iron box, throw them away because they're more of a threat to you than Israeli spies. He then goes and creates this new deal where they buy pagers because they're much less advanced than smartphones and the Israelis can't spy on them from a company based in Thailand. Little does he know that all of those pagers have already been fitted with explosives years in advance by the Israelis. So this is so mind-blowing. The Israelis basically go in 2022 to Hungary. They set up a company. They find a woman who uses the pseudonym Teresa, who then flies to Thailand, goes to a big pager manufacturer, and convinces them to work and do a two-way relationship. After about a year, she emails the CEO of this pager manufacturer and says, hey, we actually have some of our own designs for pagers and our own interesting concepts for pagers that we want to design ourselves, but we want to put your logo on them. Is that okay? He was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I guess so. So that's where the plan really started to get into motion. This is 2023. So obviously what they're doing is, at this place in Budapest in Hungary, they're designing these devices with the explosives built in. They advertise them on their website as rugged, with 85 hours of battery, great for Lebanon because there's no power there. Hezbollah love that. and they basically pitch it and market it to Hezbollah with the explosives already in it. So Hezbollah buy all these devices, tell everyone to throw, tell their supporters to throw the phones in the bin, and then so what you need to build an explosive device is you need a charge, a detonator, you need a DNT, you need a few different components, but you need a detonator. That's the most important thing. And so what they did was they turned the Hezbollah militants into the detonator themselves, because they then sent Israel basically last night sent out a mass emergency message to all these pagers that caused them to vibrate and to make very, very loud noises at a very, very annoying level. So people would reach into their pocket, take it out, and either look at it or put it here, and they would press stop, and they would detonate it by pressing that button, which is why it would go off like this in front of people and why it would blow this area off people, because they would be pressing the button. So people detonated it themselves last night. So it's absolutely out of control. And I haven't done research into how they've done it with walkie-talkies yet, but apparently everything's blowing up now. Apparently people's home devices are going off. I don't know. People's smart
machines are blowing up today. Did you see they're having a funeral for 10 of these martyrs, by the way, that were turned inside out by their pocket pagers by Israel. And so during the funeral, I don't know if you saw it, right when the funeral procession started, Israel hit the button again, and people started exploding in the middle of this.
No, because in Ukraine here, there's this kind of joke that the war journalists have, which is, if I die in a car crash, we need to think of a good story of what actually happened, right? You drag me to the front line and say that I was, in conflict. Yeah. What the fuck do you say if you get blown up by your smart fridge? What do you do? How did you die? You're a Hezbollah militant. What happened? My Samsung toaster fucking exploded. I mean, really?
Yeah, tough to explain to your new girlfriend, too, if you're a former Hezbollah fighter that had an incident with one of these in your front pocket. Apparently, it created over 1,000 eunuchs. I don't know if you know that. I read that today as well. I was like, oh, that's going to be tough in heaven. Oh, those 72-year-old.
Like, what are they? They're just fucking with it at this point. I imagine people's car radios just start blasting annoying music when they hear Hezbollah just to piss you off. Like, I feel like they're just going to start making everything fuck with them. Like the Samsung fridge locks the fridge so they can't get to their food. Yeah. Just everything.
Alarm clocks.
Alarm clocks going off at 2 a.m.
Trying to hit the snooze button. Oh my God, I hit the detonation button. That is unbelievable. Listen, Caolon, thank you. Really appreciate it. Awesome to have a laugh with you in a serious subject, and it's awesome to have you on the show again to detail your journey. And I highly encourage everybody to go and follow this young man. He is doing God's work in Ukraine. He's an award-winning film producer. He is a good individual who's decided to do the right thing because he knew what the wrong thing was. And as we stare down the barrel of the wrong thing, as we get more information, leaks come out, as you find out who's been funding this bullshit, as you find out who's been trying to turn your brain inside out, who's been trying to tell you to hate gay people, who's been trying to tell you that shutting down an international border in Canada with a bunch of people calling themselves truckers who are not truckers, that's a good idea. People that's, the race riots in England and that little ferret, Tommy Robinson, by the way, he was here. As soon as he got here, he put out a video and called me a fucking pedophile. The standard for Tommy Robinson. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're suing him.
Good. So, the first thing he did was actually be an illegal immigrant committing crimes by buying drugs from the local, what was it? The local Sikh gangs or something from immigrants. Like, what the fuck? Yeah.
So Tommy's an interesting story. Tommy, you worked with Tommy. Tommy's been put in jail for fraud, stealing money. Tommy's got a massive drug and alcohol problem. Tommy is running fucking scared at this point. So he comes to Montreal a little while ago, actually came to Toronto, got arrested for immigration related offenses. And prior to that, he's in town. He scored a bag of Coke from a bunch of guys that he knew. And he's like, I'm only going to do a little bit of Coke, and went on a fucking 3-day bender. Tommy is a perfect Russian asset. Tommy is loose with money. He has zero fucking control. He's ferretous and he's an idiot. I mean, he's just a fucking moron. And so he has been one of the more dangerous stories in this movement, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, he called me literally 3 weeks. He called me about a week before this DOJ thing dropped, and I haven't spoken to him in years. Frantic, like literally, I had to call Peter Jukes from Byline. I was like, "Is something going on?" He was like, "I know what you're doing. I know what's happening. I know what's going." And I know he's obviously on coke. I've seen him on his benders, and I was like, "What the hell?" And I think he knows that he's involved in this, and he thinks that I'm involved because Byline Times is mentioned in the doppelganger indictment as well. And I think he's like thinking that I'm behind it, which would be iconic if I was, but I'm not, unfortunately. But he was going completely crazy. But yeah, this is what he does. You know, he talks about illegal immigrants being, horrendous, and then goes and becomes an illegal immigrant committing crimes immediately. My whole time working with him, 50% of it was going to different motel rooms all around the north of England to find him in coke sessions. And he would be like a vole at the back of the room with the mini fridge piled all over the room, the light from the mini fridge illuminating the floor, and he'd be like in the corner behind the bed. And this is just like all the Russians. This is the cheapest Russian asset because a bag of coke is like 80 quid, and that's all it would cost. Like, at least with Ezra, you'd have to pull out like a couple $1,000,000. Like with him, it would just be a little thing. Like, it's so easy. They must be like, this guy, like, they just bought you 1,000,000 followers to buy a bag of coke.
How can we get Tommy Robinson to work for us? Just keep feeding him coke. Give him as much coke as humanly possible. Tommy Robinson's not going to go anywhere. Man, fuck, crazy. I feel like I got to get you back for just a Tommy Robinson episode. I got to get you back just for an Ezra episode. But dude, wonderful to have you back on the show. Great to see you again. Absolutely one of my favorite follows. Continue to do the amazing work you're doing. Congratulations on being in a loving relationship. Congratulations on being courageous and conquering that fear and going into a place that nobody else does. I think you're one of the bright lights in the media sky. I really do. So really grateful to spend some time. It's like fucking 4:00 in the morning there, so I'm going to let you go, buddy. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. This was great. This was so cathartic and nice to talk about. This was therapy. Thank you.
Dude, let's have a therapy session on the regular.
Great.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Caolan Robertson. Oh, what a guy. This is okay. We're Brit. See, he's much younger than me. I'm much older than him. We have the same interests, and we're both decent people, so we can have a decent conversation. You can't have that conversation with an idiot. He's smart. I'm the idiot. I'm just sitting here busting this guy, asking him for all the questions in the dirt. Tell me what you did. How do you think it works? What happened over there? What are you doing over there? Because that's the kind of perspective that we need to give people that have been on the other side of this bullshit. This is fucking serious. And I'll tell you something. I felt like a conspiracy theorist putting out all these tweets and retweeting Department of Justice press releases. I thought to myself, fuck. Is this real? Am I doing the bidding of the government? No, I'm giving receipts for what we know to be true and what we've always known to be true. Russia is deeply involved in paying certain media outlets, journalists, elites to do their bidding. Everything you've seen, the whole idea behind Russian interference, Chinese Communist Party interference, Indian interference in our politics, which we know is a big deal. The whole idea that the NSICOP report isn't going